Hello, I'm Boyce Lancaster, and with me today is cellist Joel Becktell, who is someplace out somewhere. It's really hard to know where people are going to be. You're like who was the guy who was broadcasting from out there somewhere? The conspiracy theorist at 3 in the morning from New Mexico somewhere. Are you in New Mexico?
I am in New Mexico.
So you're at least close to your natural habitat, which is good.
That's right.
Well, in reading some things about your career and your work, it's as a couple of us have discussed this over a number of months now. It's fascinating to me how much I'm learning about people that I've known for a long time. And you and I have known each other for years. We ran into each other in Santa Fe a number of years ago, which shocked both of us, I think. Trader Joe's, I think it was. And but what I've learned is, and I want to make sure I'm pronouncing this correctly. I mean, I've always called it Revel, but I know then there's another group that is Rebel, and so I'm assuming Revel is correct, right?
That group is called.
And you were one of the co-founders of that group, which gets off into a completely different area than what you normally do with ProMusica.
Well, it's certainly related, but the difference is that it's much smaller ensemble, but it explores performing. Well, I guess at that time it seemed a little cutting edge, but it's really all over the place now. We played in homes, we played in unconventional venues, and obviously that's all anything anybody does nowadays.
Everything is unconventional, particularly right now.
Yeah, exactly right. But even if situations hadn't gone in the odd direction they have lately, performing in homes and businesses and outdoors and so forth has just become very popular.
Well, and you've spent practically your entire career. It's almost like every musician anymore is going to be an itinerant musician in some way, shape, or form because just the nature of the beast. And there are so many places that are looking for good musicians, and you're playing in. You played in San Antonio and Santa Fe, of course, and Columbus. Give us kind of an overview of the variety of things and places you play.
When I graduated from conservatory, I went straight into a full-time orchestra, and I played in the Buffalo Philharmonic for 8 years. And that was a really good way to get my feet wet in the industry and learn a lot of repertoire and meet some fantastic touring soloists and a lot of great colleagues. I found that it was a little too much the same for me, just personally. That was my own musical personality, wanted more variety. So at that point, I moved to Austin, Texas, and I played principal in the orchestra there for several seasons. And at that time, because that wasn't a full year, full-time symphony, I was able to branch out and play in other areas. And little by little, that became what I do. So I play chamber music and some solo things, and I play in the two orchestras, the Santa Fe Symphony and the Columbus ProMusica. And I also, one of my great joys in life is playing period instruments and various different types of cellos. So I have a series playing Baroque instruments. I have a harpsichord at home, and we cart that around and play concerts. I had Yael, who plays in the viola section quite frequently, came out here, and we did a concert together on period instruments. She played Baroque violin and Baroque viola. I played Baroque cello, and we had a friend playing harpsichord. So just a combination of all those things, period and modern instruments, small ensembles, large ensembles. Just, I think the great treasure is that we have easily 400 years of amazing masterpieces of repertoire, and we have ensembles of every conceivable configuration. There's just no way that you could ever plumb the depths of how much great music is out there to experience. That's just an exciting thing to wake up to every day.
It is, and the exploration never ends. And I've noticed that you have a number of critters sitting around you that. And one of the questions I used to get asked quite a bit as I was playing things on the air was, what the heck is the difference between a regular cello and a Baroque cello? And because the naked eye, maybe they look the same, but there is actually quite a difference.
just so happens that I have a Baroque cello right here,
Just so
and
happens.
just so happens, I like to keep them handy. The most noticeable thing to audiences that are used to seeing cellists, the most notable difference with a Baroque cello is it doesn't have an end pin. It's just like a violin. It just has a little button here for the tailgut to wrap around to hold the strings in place, but no pin protruding from there. So the cello is just held by the calves of the legs. And so that's the most visible difference. But other differences, another big difference is the bow. This is a Baroque bow right here. And you'll see from this, you can see why it's called a bow, because it actually bows outwards, and some even more than this. The device changed its direction to where the curve went inwards. They just didn't change the name. So it had the name of something it didn't look like anymore.
You don't want to call it a concave.
Right. This one is, oh gosh, this one is convex, yeah. And then the modern bow, this is a very modern bow because it's made of carbon fiber. The curve goes the other way.
And is that just for strength when you are playing an instrument that has more power to it?
Partly, yes, it is. It does respond differently. The weight is balanced very, very differently. So as the instrument modernized and as the technique of playing it changed, the tendency to make melodies by crossing over the strings was replaced more by the tendency to create melodies by moving up and down the fingerboard. And this Baroque bow is very adept at going lickety-split across the strings, whereas the other bow is more adept at tracking nice and solid and giving you nice connected strokes. Boss, for example, would write something like this. And all across the strings, and doing that with a modern bow is certainly possible, but it's not the natural habitat for that kind of bow.
Which leads me to the question about the bridge, because when you watch somebody play Bach on a modern instrument, there's a lot of rocking of the bow, and it's the bridge that makes it easier to do on a Baroque cello, correct?
Not appreciably. The curvature of the bridge is what allows us to play on one string at a time instead of hitting all the strings at once, like you would if you were trying to bow on a guitar, for example, or a lute. And that amount of curvature, as steel strings became more common in the usage of modern cellists, which was really since the 1970s, bridges became slightly more arched at that point, yes. But comparing the arch of a Baroque bridge and a modern bridge, the difference is minor, not a big difference.
So it really is mostly a product of the bow.
It is.
Give us a little more of a taste of your Baroque cello, and then we'll maybe listen to some of the same thing on the modern cello.
Sure, why not? Here, I'll just use this bow here. So here's a little bit of, maybe I'll just play from the same suite I just sampled. This is the third suite of Johann Sebastian Bach. So that's the Allemande of his third suite. You want to hear the same thing on a modern cello now?
Yes, yes.
One of the first things you'll notice is that the instruments are tuned somewhat differently. So here's how that would go.
So as the orchestra tuning went up and A was put at a different level, it sharpened everything up, and that gives your cello more power to reach further into an auditorium, for instance?
Yeah, one of the, I think sort of a summarization of what's happened as instruments became modernized. The course of modernization was essentially the process of making instruments louder. And the style of tone production went from one that emphasized resonance and notes that would ring and gently fill a space to projection. where the sound is meant to be audible far away. And so modern instruments, if you just play a note and let it ring, it doesn't ring quite as long. But if you are playing for the seats and back, you'll reach them more easily with a modern instrument and modern bow and modern strings. That's a big factor as well.
The depth of sound from the Baroque cello you played is really magnificent. And like you said, it's beefy and it's full.
Yeah.
Then the one you have sitting over your left shoulder is going to take us into another range. Is that a piccolo cello?
It is, yeah. This is a string violoncello piccolo, and I have to say, forgive me for interjecting this, but it's one of my favorite instrument names in the world because, you know, the cello, the instrument that I play, is actually, the name is just a nickname. Cello is its little friendly name, but its whole name is violoncello, and so that's an alteration of the word viola, which was an Italian term for a bowed instrument. So then can be modified, like the viola that you would play on your upper arm was a viola da braccia, and the Germans now call that a braccia, and we just call it a viola. But a little one would be a violino, right? A little one, right? And a really big one would be a violone. And the violoncello means a little, very large viola. And this instrument, the violoncello piccolo, means the little, tiny, very large viola.
Little tiny, very large. The description of me when I was 7, too.
Here, hold on. That's close enough for a little Bach. This is the instrument that Johann Sebastian Bach wrote his 6th suite. He wrote 6 suites with preludes and dance movements, and the last one was written for this instrument, the violoncello piccolo. And it is smaller than a normal cello, but it also has the addition of a top string, so it goes higher. It has 5 choices instead of 4. Also, gut strings are a little less prone to stay in tune, especially in weather like we're having here in New Mexico. But this one sounds a little like this. So the low strings lose some of their oomph. We have this one. So it goes quite a lot higher. Of course, cellists nowadays play up here in thumb position, but in the time of Bach, that was pretty rare. So if you wanted to play high notes, you had to have a smaller instrument.
Just get another and add another string to it, and you're in business.
There you go.
Well, I appreciate that, Joel. And you, all of this information you've given us has served you well, because not only are you performing, you're actually involved in a company that builds instruments, correct?
That is from my past. Yeah.
Okay, so you did that at one time. You were at least advising people and helping get instruments built and manufactured.
Yeah, when I was a child growing up in New Mexico, my cello teacher had another career as a violin maker, and she's now a world famous luthier. In fact, this instrument, this modern instrument that I played a few notes on, is made by her. Her name is Ann Cole. And having spent many years as her student, I picked up things from her workshop as well as from her teaching studio, and I learned quite a bit about instrument making, and eventually put that to use in the instrument business. It seemed like a good idea at the time. In retrospect, it wasn't a life path that I was willing to make permanent. So I gradually got back out of it. But yeah, I was involved in what was at the time and may to this day still be the world's largest international stringed instrument making company. That was pretty exciting, traveling all over the world and helping to design, I should say, instruments and bows and cases and things like that. It was fun.
But it's obvious that your passion is the performance, and we love having an opportunity to hear a little bit of that here, and of course hope that in the not too distant future we'll see you somewhere around Central Ohio again with ProMusica. There is one question I'd like to ask you that we've been asking all of the musicians as we speak to them. And maybe I've just seen some of that here. Is there any kind of a silver lining you found in the midst of all of this change and all of this lack of movement for you as a musician?
I would say definitely. I don't wish to be glib about it though, because the suffering that people are undergoing is very real and very profound. But at the same time, I don't think there's any harm in making the best of things. And in that spirit, I've had a chance to do a lot of things that most summers I wouldn't. For instance, I know this is a pretty minor benefit, but I've gotten to spend more time in the garden than doing some landscaping and planting and things like that, which takes a lot of work in this dry climate. The probably the biggest thing that I've undertaken, and this is I'm coming out here basically, but I've taken up painting.
Wow.
Now, I've uh, been fascinated by the visual arts and, well, forever. And when I was a student at the Cleveland Institute of Music, I was also a guard at the Cleveland Museum of Art. And something got under my skin, and I've been appreciating and collecting art to the best of my ability ever since. And about a month and a half ago, I just cleared my schedule for a day and I sat down and started painting and haven't stopped. Been doing it every day.
That's fabulous. I think that you are actually acting upon all of the things all of us said, well, wow, I can do this and I can do this and I can do this. And then we're still thinking, yeah, I could do this and maybe I could do that. And you're actually doing it. That's wonderful. I really appreciate your time and thank you so much for taking a few minutes to join us and show us some of your babies back there.
Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Boyce. I'm glad we got a chance, even though this time it wasn't with the serendipity of finding each other in a parking lot in Santa Fe, but always a pleasure.
Yes, always a pleasure. Good. Look forward to seeing you again soon in person, Joel. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, Boyce.